Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about how a plant called tobacco had a huge impact on early American history. It wasn't just a crop, it helped shape the way people lived, traded, and built colonies. Tobacco originally grew in the Americas, and many believe it started in South America. In the 1530s, a French explorer named Jacques Cartier saw indigenous people in what is now Canada using tobacco. The name tobacco actually comes from a word some native people used for the pipe they smoked it with. Tobacco reached England around 1564, brought by a man named Sir John Hawkins. Some people in England may have already been using it before that, but once it caught on, it grew fast. In less than 200 years, tobacco became the most valuable product sent from the English colonies in North America to other parts of the world. It stayed popular until much later, when people began to understand how bad it was for your health. For Native American communities, tobacco was special and often used in important ceremonies. They believed it was a gift from the spirits and used it to help with healing, things like toothaches and earaches. It was also a way to show respect or make promises. When they used tobacco in these ways, it was usually smoked through a pipe during ceremonies. In the English colonies, especially in places like Virginia, tobacco became a big deal. The colony of Jamestown became successful mostly because of it. In 1612, a man named John Rolfe figured out how to dry and cure tobacco so it could survive the long trip across the ocean to Europe. After that, pipe smoking became popular in Northern Europe, and even Queen Elizabeth I tried it after being encouraged by Sir Walter Raleigh. Other parts of the world started growing tobacco too, but the British colonies in North America quickly became the main place people got their tobacco from. Even though King James I of England didn't like smoking, he thought it was gross and for lazy people, he still allowed it because it made a lot of money through taxes. Spain also allowed tobacco because it brought in cash, even though they banned other indigenous plants like coca and peyote. The Dutch also saw the value of tobacco, but instead of growing it in colonies, they focused on trading it. For them, tobacco was also a way to work closely with England. Growing tobacco took a lot of hard work. At first, European workers who had signed contracts called indentured servants did the job. But by 1675, they were mostly replaced by enslaved Africans. Besides needing lots of workers, tobacco farming also needed huge amounts of land. After a terrible smallpox outbreak between 1617 and 1619 killed many native people in Virginia and Maryland, the land became available for tobacco farming. When indentured servants finished their contracts and gained freedom, many of them started growing tobacco too. This caused colonists to want even more land. But tobacco quickly wore out the soil, so new land was always needed. Colonists traded with native people for land, or sometimes just forced them to move away. While colonies like Virginia and Maryland were growing lots of tobacco, some northern colonies were doing the opposite. In 1632, Massachusetts began fining people for using tobacco. Other colonies like New Netherland and Connecticut also banned smoking in public during the mid-1600s. These bans were not just about health. They were also worried that smoking could start fires. Even pirate ships had rules about where smoking was allowed on board. And in 1651, England passed the Navigation Act. This law said only English ships could bring tobacco into England. That decision upset the Dutch, Scottish traders, and even the colonists themselves. Things got even stricter with the Second Navigation Act in 1660, which said colonists could only sell tobacco to England. Almost all the tobacco that ended up in Europe, around 90%, went through England first. These kinds of rules made colonists feel like England was treating them unfairly, and it planted the early seeds of rebellion. Tobacco had become so valuable that people actually used it like money. You could pay for goods and services with it. But not all tobacco was the same. When some farmers started sending lower quality tobacco overseas, Virginia passed the Inspection Act in 1730. This law said all tobacco meant for export had to go through special warehouses controlled by the government. There, it was checked to make sure it was good enough to send out. Even the barrels, called hogsheads, that held the tobacco had to meet size rules. Not long after, Maryland created similar laws. Because tobacco ruined the soil quickly, owning land wasn't the real measure of wealth anymore. What really showed how rich someone was: the number of enslaved workers they had. Most landowners had enslaved people working their farms. But unlike in the Caribbean, where enslaved people were often treated as replaceable, the colonies in North America encouraged enslaved families to have children. That way, the workforce could grow naturally. Tobacco farming also changed how southern colonies looked and worked. Instead of tight-knit towns like in New England, tobacco farmers lived spread out on big plots of land. Small villages weren't as common in the South because people needed space for their farms. And because of this setup, wealthy landowners often held a lot of power. They didn't just run farms, they also ran local governments. It was a very different world compared to the more democratic town-based communities in the North.